Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the last installment of We Built This. This is night number 3. This is our final night. I am Orlando Bagley. I serve as the host of Urban Consulate Detroit. I'm here in the city of Detroit, broadcasting live from the Cochran House. Yes, the Cochran House. From another area in the house. I'm in a little nook area with my coffee and my books and my lamp and all of that. You know, got the mood set just right. You want to visit the CochranHouse.com the next time you are planning a trip to Detroit. It's magnificent Black-owned bed and breakfast that's owned by 2 sisters. Oh, what an amazing pair and what an amazing house. We are so thankful to them for allowing us to be housed here all week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I want to give a special shout out to the New Economy Initiative. The New Economy Initiative is what made all of this possible. We're going to be talking to the director of the New Economy Initiative a little later on. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. Hey, if you're live on Facebook and you're watching us, be sure to tell us where you are watching from, and then do me a favor right now. Do me a quick favor. I want you to share this video. Let's make sure that this conversation goes as far and wide as it possibly can. I want to shout out all of the Detroit Innovation Fellows. We had fellows with us all week long. We had 2 fellows join us last night. The Detroit Innovation Fellows just wrapped up its 2019-2020 cohort about a week ago almost. And so we are so proud of them and the work that they're doing. I also want to give a mad shout out to Bridge Detroit. Bridge Detroit is our media partner in this effort. And so all of this content that you are seeing, you will also see live on bridgedetroit.com. Listen, I am so very excited to be talking to IOB. IOB stands for In Our Backyards. And I have 2 very, very special guests with me to talk about funding our neighbors. So under the guise of We Built This, tonight's conversations will be about, number 1, how we fund our neighbors. And then number 2, how do we invest in people? We see a lot of investment in businesses. We see a lot of investments in organizations, nonprofit organizations to be specific. But how do we invest in people who are just doing amazing work? How do we fund our neighbors and how do we invest in people? And so here for the Funding Our Neighbors conversation is Aaron Barnes of IOB and Jennifer Allen of IOB. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for inviting us.
It's great to be here.
Hi, Aaron. Good to see you.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Yes, you guys know these names. If you are on the IOB listserv, you see a note from Aaron or Jennifer almost every week. And so if you supported an IOB campaign, thank you. But we're going to, sort of dive a little bit deeper into IOB. What is it and what is it supposed to accomplish, Aaron?
Thanks so much for the question. I really appreciate being here. IOB stands for the opposite of NIMBY, or in our backyards. And this means that residents can make a positive change in their own neighborhoods. We're an online platform for people to work on community development projects. And a lot of people think of us as a crowdfunding platform because it's an easy way to raise money for the projects that you need to get done in your neighborhood. I think that the important thing to know about IOB is that, we want you to know that you're not alone in the work that you're doing in your neighborhood. And one of the ways that we show that is by providing everybody who works with us a fundraising coach. I think a common misunderstanding about it, crowdfunding, is that the platform does all the fundraising for you, but that's just not the case. And unlike other platforms, IOB provides you a personal fundraising coach to meet you where you're at in terms of your fundraising experience and confidence, and to help set you up for success from the very beginning and to be alongside on the sidelines to coach you along the way.
Thank you, Aaron. Jennifer, can you talk about some of the cities that IOB works in and how folks may be able to plug into this platform and utilize it to advance their own missions and projects?
Sure. So IOB is a national crowdfunding platform, and we are a nonprofit, but we also have a place-based model where we have staff living in cities across the country. So we have staff in Cincinnati, Cleveland, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Memphis. I don't think I forgot one. Aaron, let me know if I did. But so in those cities, we have staff that can meet with people one-on-one, learn about the amazing things they are doing in their community, and kind of coach them as they create even new solutions that they want to raise money and resources and expand their networks for supporting. So it's pretty easy. We kind of ask people to just start by just sharing your ideas with us, and then we can find a way to get on the phone with you, especially in like COVID times. It's on the phone or on Zoom. It's hard to get to these coffee shops anymore, but we just like to start with a conversation and kind of strategize. And I think one of the benefits of having folks in particular cities is they know the context well. So let's say you're doing something like a community garden, and you're like, oh, wow, like, do we have control of the land to even, do the garden here? And how could I work with the city to like get that? Our staff have expertise to help you kind of navigate local institutions that are just specific to each city.
Jennifer, you mentioned the time of COVID, and we're in a particularly wild moment in history right now. How exactly has neighborhood work shifted in the time of COVID, and has the need increased? Has it decreased? What are you guys seeing?
Yes, so we experienced March through, I would say, early May, the most projects ever in that like time period. And so we've seen a huge increase in people stepping up to help their communities where our institutions have been failing us, unfortunately. That has looked a variety of ways. So we've had people that continue to just keep doing their work. An example is a project in Cleveland. It's called Cleveland Art Week. And so like it sounds, Art Week, it was all about like having a week where people are making art and convening to do that. And they can't do that anymore because of COVID. And so they created these art kits to be sent to families where they could make their art at home. So we have people that are like, you know what, even though this is a pandemic, I'm going to continue to keep doing the good work that my community needs. We've had folks like mutual aid groups that are like, wow, like my neighbors are shut in. They can't get groceries. They can't go get their COVID test. How can we create a network of aid to make sure that happens? And so, for example, we've had mutual aid groups raise over $1 million thus far. And like, just to be frank, IOB, when we look at our goals year in, year out, our goals are around $1 million, $1.5 million per year. And like we surpass that. So it's pretty amazing to see the absolutely heroic levels that people are going to raise this money to serve their communities.
That's pretty amazing. One of the things that you both sort of hinted at is IOB filling a gap that institutions have created. Aaron, do you want to expound on what that gap is and why it exists?
Sure. I mean, I think I can talk about this from a couple different perspectives. I was in a sort of an exercise in reflecting on COVID, and the prompt was to say, like, what's the title of your 6-word memoir of the last few weeks of your life? And mine was, why does helping people feel so much like money laundering? And I think one of the things that's really important is that there's all of these systems and structures set up to protect institutions from like bad actors. But I think that that's also where people are actually hitting a lot of walls in terms of how they can support their neighbors, right? So IOB offers this very, very specific type of wraparound service that's really bizarre called fiscal sponsorship, which means that anyone, you, me, a business, a group of people, can collect tax-deductible donations by using IOB as a fiduciary or as a fiscal sponsor to pass the funds through
That is amazing. You know what? That's really amazing, because I think in the next segment, we're talking about investing in people. And sometimes there are just people who are in neighborhoods doing amazing work that's not an organization, that doesn't have the financial background or the audited financials to be able to garner traditional philanthropic support, what have you. And so for IOB to offer yourselves as fiduciary agent, not only so that they can receive donations, but so that traditional philanthropy, dare I say, can donate as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so, a lot of mutual aid organizations are not incorporated as 501c3 charities. Most of the projects that IOB is accustomed to serving are using us as a fiscal sponsor. And so it was easy for us to see that there was this gap in relief funding that was being directed towards established charities and not enough funding going to like the newer groups or just the grassroots groups that don't have that charitable status. And so we wanted specifically to be able to provide a service to fill that gap during COVID.
I love it. And you guys are rocking and rolling. I think you guys just announced today or within the last couple of days that you hit a milestone, $10 million raised for neighborhood projects, $10 million raised for neighborhood projects, specifically for running clubs, restorative justice, community gardens, and more. Talk about how it feels to have reached this milestone, Jennifer.
I am happy to react to that, but I also think, Aaron, you should jump in as one of the co-founders of the organization. I mean, I think it's pretty impressive. Again, the real heroes are IOB leaders, right? So to think of that scale of money that people are pouring back into their community is just pretty impressive. Aaron, I'm curious about what you would say to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jennifer said this earlier. This really snuck up on us. We supported people donating about the same amount this year in 12 weeks as we did last year in 12 months. So, right, this was a very surprising outpouring of, yeah, the heroes who are the people who are like leading all of these projects in the neighborhoods. And then I think there's also all of these people who wanted to give and wanted to be able to share their stimulus checks, whatever it was that was motivating them to like give and be generous during this time. And so it's great that we're hitting this milestone. It's a big one, but I think truly like it's an indication perhaps more of the failings of our institutions to be able to support communities in the way that we need.
Talk about for what that means as a co-founder of this organization, Aaron. I mean, did you ever vision this far ahead?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that one of the things that we started to realize after several years of working with leaders is that folks were coming to us because they couldn't find funding to support their work elsewhere. And I think like something I joke about saying is that like IOB is a place where like projects that can't find funding elsewhere go. And I think like a lot of what IOB sees in funding is an indication of like what's being ignored in more traditional forms of philanthropy or in grassroots fundraising. And so I think like I'm always happy to talk about that, to like bring that up, talk about trends in philanthropy, the ways that philanthropy might want to consider changing their operations or the way they make decisions about where their grants go, because there's plenty of really worthy work that IOB supports every day. And we know that they have tried other places to go to, whether that's through their municipality's grassroots grant program or through a small grant maker in the area. And it's sad to see that.
Yeah, I think about, folks, especially in Detroit and in other cities around the nation, doing amazing work with little resources, especially Black-led organizations and projects. And on the IOB website, there's a banner that says that IOB is amplifying Black-led crowdfunding campaigns. My first question is, why does that need to be stated right now? And secondly, do you all track the projects that you help out, and how and who's leading them? Are they, people of color, white folks, that whole deal, Jennifer? And Jennifer, you worked a lot on Black spaces and talked a lot about Black stuff.
Yes, as a Black woman, yes, I do. Yes, I do volunteer with Black Space, but that is a whole other episode. With IOB, if you look on our website and you see our values, you'll see inclusivity is key. And so we've always had this value of like including all voices in solution building. And so when those are left out, it's like our role to bring them in. So that's just in general. And then we come to a moment like this where we're in a pandemic, where Black families, individuals are disproportionately impacted. Fast forward to the final match of this moment in time with George Floyd being killed, and like the, rise of another important movement moment of Black Lives Matter. It made total sense, right?
It is a perfect storm happening right now. Census, election year, tax day, Black Lives Matter, a pandemic. Jada Pinkett Smith and August Alsina. What is not happening?
Another episode. So like I said, it was already a value we had. And like you said, with this perfect storm, it made absolute sense for us to be very, very clear to our audience that absolutely we are behind the Black community and Black-led ideas being raised up. Aaron, you know this very well, just from the angle of you doing the fundraising. You've got like some stats there. I kind of want you to kind of talk about just like what you see with Black ideas being served by philanthropy.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. I think it's actually maybe an indication of a problem that it's difficult to find really hard evidence of what percentage of philanthropic funding goes to Black-led organizations. But I think the most reliable source of data on that I found is from the National Committee on Responsive Philanthropy. And it seems like around 90% of philanthropic funding goes to white-led organizations. And I think a huge portion of that is actually dedicated to improving the conditions of communities of color. And I think like one thing that bothers me about that.
So white-led organizations working in colored communities, trying to, okay, gotcha.
And
sure I understood.
I am a white leader of an organization that focuses on racial justice and works in communities of color. And I think it's just important to be really, really clear about what that means. One of IOB's founding principles is that neighbors know what's best for their own neighborhoods. And I think like the way that I interpret that is that people closest to an issue are the best positioned to solve it and to like steward that issue. And so, I kind of liken this to the idea that like, men design tampons. Are men really the most expert on menstrual hygiene? Probably not. And so I just think that like, there's ways of thinking about who should lead different types of projects. And I think, funding Black-led ideas, Black-led organizations, Black-led businesses is just like significantly underfunded, and that needs to be addressed. And honestly, like in my experience of talking to funders about the way that IOB disperses funds directly to individuals, for the last 12 or 13 years, 99% of the time when I explain that IOB disperses funds directly to residents, I'm met with the exact same response, which is, aren't you afraid that they'll run off with the money? And I think like, to me, I hear that as a trust issue that's rooted in classism and racism. I can't really figure out where.
It's also, criminalization of, especially Black folk who are do-it-yourselfers. You know what I mean? I think that for so long, especially in the city of Detroit, where we didn't have a lot of municipal capacity even to deliver city services, folks took it upon themselves to fill in that gap with little or no support. And so I appreciate what you said about neighbors knowing what is best for them and their neighbors. But how how else do you honor that expertise in this moment? Has anything shifted in the way that you amplify these Black projects? As you have stated it emphatically on the website, what else has shifted in this time, Jennifer or Aaron?
I
Whoever.
mean, we're definitely looking to forge more partnerships. So we mentioned like fiscal sponsorship as being, sometimes it's a barrier for people that are not attached to a nonprofit organization. They don't plan to be part of a nonprofit organization to raise funds. And so, for example, we're good friends with Mortar, and we've talked to them like, what would it mean for you guys to be sort of open to saying like, yes, we know IOB, we partner with IOB. If you're a business that wants to crowdfund with IOB, come to us, we'll be your fiscal sponsor. Another recent partnership, United Way in Cincinnati, another friend of ours, we had already been in touch with them, and just a couple weeks ago, we were able to offer our fiscal sponsorship to some of their grantees. And so part of it is just looking for opportunities, talking to groups that are already focused on Black-led ideas, and see if IOB can fill a gap somewhere, be an asset somewhere, and support the folks that they're already working with.
It's an interesting model, and I'm sure it's a model that a lot of DIYers would be interested in exploring. Explain to me though, this business model. How do y'all make money to sustain? Is it through the fiscal sponsorship? Are you guys a nonprofit that can solicit philanthropic support? How does it work?
I'm happy to take that. I think about 60% of our funding comes from foundations right now. A lot of it are the foundations who are interested in supporting our place-focused work. And then about 10% of our funding comes from different types of partnerships that we have with some of our match challenges. And about 30% comes from individuals who support our work. So the most of it, like a traditional nonprofit, is typically funded. During normal times, we also invite people to give IOB a gratuity when they make a donation to a project. And that's a great way for us to have like a steady stream of a small amount of revenue. And then typically we do have like fees to use IOB's platform. It's $35 if your project is over $1,000. And we typically charge for fiscal sponsorship 5%, but those platform use fees and the fiscal sponsorship fees we've been waiving since mid-March.
Wow.
So we're not collecting any revenue from that. And we're lucky that a couple of foundations have actually helped to step in and help us fill that gap.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So, all the questions here. So folks who are doing projects are able to set their goals. Does everyone always meet their goal, and what happens if they don't?
It's a great question. So we like to call it like our flexible finish policy, where we're going to be flexible with you. And this is part of being a nonprofit mission-driven crowdfunding platform. It's literally our job to just keep removing barriers and making it easier and easier for people to raise the money and other resources they need. And so, yeah, if you are like, hey, you know what, I was going to raise 5,000, but we've got 3 already, and that's all we need. We want to start implementing our project. No problem, no penalty. We'll disperse the funds to you. Same thing goes if you're like, wow, we're already at 5,000 and now we think we want to raise another 5,000. Can we increase our goal? Absolutely. Oh, and by the way, we need more time to do that. Can we like extend our timeline? Absolutely. No penalty for that either. So we have a value of trying to get to yes in everything that we do, because it's why we exist. We're trying to be as supportive as possible for people to make the neighborhood change they're working on.
I love it. So earlier in the conversation, both of you alluded to, I think you called it IOB stars. And I know that you all are in various cities, and of course, I'm broadcasting live from Detroit. Talk about some of the IOB stars that you would want to amplify in this time. And of course, I'm fishing for Detroit examples as well, if you have any.
I mean, I can start with 2. So one of the impressive Detroit projects, Auntie Naz Village, did a free food boxes on like doorsteps project. They raised a lot of money. They raised about $26,000. It's a community center based on the west side. And so that was just like a shining example of folks just hitting the ground running and really able to pour a lot more resources into the community when like food delivery was a huge need. So that was really exciting to see. Some of the mutual aid projects are just, they're raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. We just got a message from a campaign called South Brooklyn Mutual Aid. Whitney, the IOB leader, she emailed, she said, hey, unfortunately, like the food delivery that we're doing, it's still a need. Can we increase our goal to $200,000? Like we're extending this through September. And so on the one hand, it's unfortunate that need is still so great. On the other hand, it's very inspiring to see that these mutual aid groups that have been going so very hard since March are committed. They're not gonna let their neighbors go without. So those are two stories that come to mind for me.
I love it. I love it. We have a question from Kalisha Davis on Facebook. And she's asking about youth involvement in the decision-making process, and specifically IOB being open to youth-driven projects, youth-driven when we talk about ideation to putting it on paper to implementation. How are young people able to take advantage of this, Erin?
Yeah, they are. Actually, the very, very first IOB project was led by a 14-year-old.
Get out.
And
Are you serious?
yeah,
In what city?
it was in Brooklyn. It was when we
Nice.
first started in 2009. Um, but yeah, I think it's super important to center the ideas that youth have around their communities, and they have passion and drive. And really, they just need an adult to make sure that they're doing all of the legal things correct, to sign all the forms that we have, and to make sure that there's somebody who can receive the funds. Otherwise, it's really straightforward.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. We're coming up. We're coming up on 2 minutes, and so I want to allow each of you to have parting last words. But in your last words, I would love for you to tell us how can local builders plug into uh, the IOB network wherever they may be. So we will start with Jennifer.
Sure. So if you're somebody that is looking to do a campaign of your own, maybe you just have an idea and you're thinking about it and need to bounce some ideas off of us, I would go to iob.org/idea and just spend 3 minutes giving us your basic information. And that's how we get in touch with you to do that. If you're someone that is just looking to support work, you can go to our website and kind of search by city and see what projects are going on and kind of select the one you want to donate to. So yeah, I think those are two good starting points. We also have newsletters that you can sign up for to just stay in touch with what's happening around the country.
Thank you, Jennifer. Erin?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple things. If you, if you are an institution looking to make grants or disperse funds really close to the grassroots and fund neighborhood work, we do partner with organizations who are interested in having a match challenge about like a specific issue. Um, and so, that could be geographically based or issue based. But also any partner that's like focused on building skills for residents. And that like the folks that you're working with do need funds for their project-based work, we can also partner with you that way.
Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. You both and IOB is doing amazing work by allowing neighbors to fund their neighbors in the magnificent work that they're doing. And kudos to you for making sure that your equity for focus uplifts projects by Black folks in our cities, especially in a city like Detroit, where we're majority Black. I think the largest majority Black city in America. That means so much. And so I really, really appreciate the both of you for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. All right, guys, we have more for you tonight. Again, I'm Orlando Bagley. I am the host of Urban Consulate Detroit. I am broadcasting live from the Cochran House Luxury Inn. So they will be opening back up in August, their Black-owned business. Visit the cochranhouse.com if you are headed to Detroit, or if you need a staycation, if you're from Detroit and you need to get out of the house. They're opening up in August, Black owned by two sisters, y'all. Yes, Rodrika and Francina. They ain't playing around. It's amazing in this house. I'm so excited about our next conversation. I also want to remind you to stick around after the next conversation, because we're having an after party featuring Drake Pfeiffer, one of Detroit's dopest DJs. But coming up next, we have a conversation in store talking about investing in our people. We're talking to some major philanthropic players here in the city of Detroit that I will introduce right after you take a look at this video.
Value to this neighborhood. Just the fact that you're here makes this bloom wherever you're planted. Add value to wherever you are. You can bring value to this neighborhood. Just the fact that you're here makes this neighborhood more valuable. I have 3 kids and I love them, and I want them to just change the world. I tell them all the time, like, you are destined to do something great. You're going to do something wonderful and make the world a better place. I don't know what it is yet, but whatever you do, make sure that you keep community first. We are at the Bagley Community Pocket Park. We turned the lot into a park because we don't really have a place to gather in the neighborhood. We want to get playground equipment installed, and then we're going to try to get the house completely rehabbed so that we can have a meeting space, a gathering space, and we want to get some of these alleys cleaned out as well. We want to completely get it cleaned out, put down a permeable surface so that you can like bike it, or maybe we can put like an exercise trail or an art gallery or something that is usable and something that people will enjoy. To have this project to work on and know that I am making some difference in the world. I would just want to do as much as I can while I can. Hopefully I will be here for another 50 years. But I am in the later stages of cancer right now. And so, you know, like all the little victories are major now. You know, like it's not a little victory, it's huge. There was already a lot of purpose behind doing it, but for me, it's just even more.
All right, that was Samoy Smith from Creating Space Detroit on the video. She was a part of the very first cohort of Detroit Innovation Fellows and a close friend of mine. She did succumb to cancer earlier this year. And so we're sending love and prayers to her family, her business partners, and all of that. We honor Samoy and the vision that she had for her neighborhood and for just seeing the need and creating an answer to that need. And I love how she framed value. The neighborhood has value because people are there, and those people are valuable. And that video is really just, it gives you the essence of who Samoy Smith really was. She loved her children. She was an amazing mother. She loved her neighborhood. She loved the city of Detroit. And she loved her friends, and she loved NEI and the Detroit Innovation Fellowship. I knew we were going to play that video, but for some reason I'm still choked up. So I'm going to try to move on. We miss you, Samoy. Rest in power. I am excited to have and host 3 amazing powerhouses here in the city of Detroit that is moving and shaking in the philanthropic space, particularly around this topic of investing in people. So I first want to introduce the director of the New Economy Initiative, which is making all of this possible. Pam Lewis, thank you so much for joining us.
So nice to be here.
Happy to have you. I also want to introduce the Detroit director of the Knight Foundation. Been on the job, I think, a little over a year now, Nate.
No, man, I'm 7 months in.
He's only, golly, he's only 7 months in. Welcome, Nate Wallace from the Knight Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And lastly, I want to welcome the Detroit director of the Ford Foundation, Kevin Ryan. Happy to have you, Kevin.
Hey, Orlando.
How long
Glad
you
to
been
be
in the
here.
job, Kevin? You've been here more than
Almost
a year,
3 years now. Almost 3 years,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, cool. Because it feels like Nate has been at Knight forever.
It does.
Hey, y'all, I'm so happy to have y'all. This is what I've been looking forward to all week, the culmination of all of these conversations under the guise of We Built This. And this particular conversation is about investing in people. And Pam, you saw the video of Samoy, a beautiful piece that NEI helped to put together to help her tell her story and secure additional support. Talk about NEI's stance in investing in people.
Thank you, Orlando, and it is good to be here. Yeah, that video is, it actually speaks to something that became important to us. New Economy Initiative, really we're an intermediary that moves grant dollars from large foundations to nonprofits that are supporting entrepreneurship. And we've always done it with an inclusive lens. And we were in a space where we were seeing a lot of innovation around tech and high tech, and also doing a lot of work in the neighborhoods around small business. And we saw this disconnect between what we thought those that have solutions, who were the innovators, and then those that really understood the problem were the people in the neighborhood. For example, if you think of a mobility issue, a lot of mobility assets in Michigan with U of M and Center for Mobility, a lot of mobility issues in Detroit. And so we thought it was really important to start to build a bridge between those that had the problems and those that had the answers. And we were very wrong, right? I mean, even me saying it out loud today is embarrassing. You know, that was our perspective. And it was really when we started talking to those that are on the ground, those that were working in community, Diana Nacera, Jenny Lee, Allied Media, our friends at Allied Media, who spoke truth to us. And we could listen and hear that, and created this Detroit Innovation Fellows program, which really was moving grant dollars directly to individuals, whether they had a formed organization or not, which was
That's innovative.
Pretty innovative and pretty unique move. But we were also tired of hearing a lot of people flying into Detroit to solve problems. We were tired of ourselves actually thinking that way. And what we discovered were, Samoy is one of so many individuals in this city. Necessity is the mother of invention, but at the same time, there are brilliant innovators. And the way we even define an innovator, we need to change how we, who we envision in our heads when we think of the innovator. We need to envision Samoy. We need to envision people like that, because they are really doing amazing, brilliant things.
You talked about investing in people, whether they have an organization or not. I think that's a pretty bold move on part of even an intermediary who's passing through grant dollars. Talk about what that process was like to even get something like that done.
Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating because, but one, we had to make a really strong case. It was something that Jennifer and Aaron said in the earlier session, right? I mean, what happens with people when you start talking about moving grant dollars to organizations or things that aren't as structured as the organizations we're used to, and also what's being ignored in traditional grant making. So we had to make the case. We had to also on our end, once we convinced those in leadership that this was the right thing to do, that there was definitely a pipeline on the other end of that we also had to create a process that was accessible, right? We weren't going to have them submit 3-page proposals and full budgets. It was just a quick form, and on the back end, they weren't going to have to submit these big onerous grant reports. The film was actually the grant report, going through the interview, talking about what they achieved. And so there was a lot of adjustments that had to be made once the decision was made to also make it accessible so that people without a lot of resources in an organization could actually feel comfortable participating.
I love it. Kevin, I want to punt to you. 3 years in the job at Ford, and man, listen, I've been watching how you move and how you make grants. Just and I think in so many instances, it is the personification of investing in people. Tell me why that's the strategy you chose to employ in your grant making.
Yeah, thanks, Orlando. I really am happy to be here, especially with Pam and Nate, two of my favorite people who are doing amazing work. Even though Nate just got on the job, he just jumped in and he's making it happen. So I was just very fortunate to be hired by Ford to open up the Detroit office and actually come back home and be able to spend time really to build out our program and strategy. And one of the ways that I tried to do that, but before I came back to Detroit, I spent many years in New York, first on the nonprofit side, running an organization, and then in local philanthropy in New York, where we did a lot of local funding of grassroots organizations, organizing activist groups. And so when I came to Detroit and came back home after many years away, my first step was I need to really understand what's happening in communities. So I just made it my goal, but when I interviewed for the Ford job, I really looked at what was going on in Detroit, talked to some friends back here, and really tried to lay out a list of people that I wanted to meet when I got here. So I came up with a list of 250 people, which grew to a list of over 1,200 people. And those are the people I met with in the first year and a half that I was in Detroit. I was doing 30 meetings a week.
Everybody.
But see, the beauty of it is I was meeting people, and I was meeting the people at first who are the ones who have the most access to philanthropy. So, people know Ford's on the ground. There's certain people who know, I should call, let me get in the door, let me do this. But I got to give a shout out to people like, Bryce Detroit, Alea Harvey Quinn, Sarita Scott, my old buddy from University of Michigan, the late, great Marlo Stoudemire. All these people who I met, and it wasn't just about what they were doing. It was about, have you met such and such? Let me connect you to such and such. And I was able to really start building relationships with people through those relationships. And I'm still meeting new people. Shout out to the Bog Center. Bog Center has introduced me to new people in the past couple of weeks. We're on the ground in communities doing this work. So part of it is really trying to get out there and do it, because the reality of it is a lot of Detroiters, for very good reason, don't trust institutions, particularly philanthropy. And if we want to change that, we actually have to get out in communities, talk to people, make ourselves as available as possible. And admittedly, sometimes we don't always get to people quickly because there's so many people we need to talk to. So sometimes it may take time. But building those relationships and leaving space in your budget to try to find ways to support both organizations that are bigger, doing in more established groups, but also some of those grassroots organizations. And I appreciate IOB, who was one of our grantees, because we do need to find ways to get resources to those groups that don't have 501c3s. So we use a lot of fiscal sponsors and intermediaries to get resources out, but we still could do more.
You talked about this mistrust that I would dare to say is systemic amongst especially communities of colors and institutions. And, especially in a city like Detroit, that's mostly Black, a lot of these institutions have Black faces, but still perpetuate the same kind of oppression that we see from our white counterparts. How did you break that down, and how did that turn into grant making and support?
Well, to me, the first thing is always, you look at Detroit, let's just take the activist, organizer, community leader community. There's 6 or 7 layers of that in Detroit. There's people doing all kinds of things in different spaces, connected to each other, people over here doing things. So really trying to build trust with people who are out there doing it, and then saying to them, who am I missing? Who should I be talking to? Who's on the ground in communities doing this work? It is a long process to figure that out and also to connect with people. And I feel like in some ways, sometimes it stops. You mentioned the sort of black faith leadership. Sometimes it starts with this idea of funding the talented tenth, the old W.E.B. Du Bois framework about if we support those, the 10% that are the most educated and the ones who when you look at their resume, it looks like they're the stars and they're the ones who are really doing that work. And I'm definitely not disparaging people who have worked hard to get there, but that leaves out a whole set of people, especially in a city where race plus class matters. You really have got to connect with people where they are and then try to build honest relationships with them. And that's challenging. That's very challenging to do. But you have to put the time in to try to do it.
I want to bring in Nate Wallace on this conversation. First off, I want to publicly acknowledge and thank Nate Wallace for joining this conversation, because he's a person that doesn't do a lot of panel discussions. He's just a guy that's about the work. So Nate, thank you once again for joining us. I want to talk to you about Knight's investment in people and sort of have you chime in onto what Kevin was talking about building bridges from institutions to what is actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, so one of the first things I did when I got to Knight was they give you this list. You get a list of people that you should talk to, who's in charge, who's doing what in philanthropy, that sort of thing. One of the ideas I came in with, one of the notions that I came in with is whatever the strategy is going to be in neighborhoods. So you can't just walk into a neighborhood, right? You have to be invited into a neighborhood. So, I reached out to friends who I knew lived in neighborhoods. I reached out to other people who knew people who were doing the work. So that's when the trust building started. Like Kevin said, it's a long process. It's an interesting process for someone to trust you enough to tell you their vision, and it's a really vulnerable thing for someone to tell you what they're passionate about, what they're working on, and what they're excited about in building that relationship. You have to be in a place where you're apt to listen. You got to be in a place where you're also contributing to the conversation, and you got to build that bridge. So that was one of the first things that I did when I got to philanthropy. And the second thing I did was I reached out to Kevin Wright. I knew that Kevin was doing the work, and his reputation preceded him, and this is somebody who I wanted to talk to in regards to creating a portfolio in an 80% Black city that was representative of the people that live there. So as far as Knight is concerned, we believe that the people that's closest to the problem or the pain point is closest to the solution. Yeah. Talking to a friend of mine, Niles Heron over at Pop Dog, he's a strategy guy over there. Me and him were having a conversation, and we were talking about innovation, and we were talking about the fact that the reason a lot of communities are able to innovate is because they've been inundated with so much technology that they can become critical of the technology itself, and then be able to say, you know what, this can work better. I think that as far as a philanthropic model, we're already there. We already know the people that's doing the work. We already know the people that's passionate about the project. And my job is to pour gasoline on that idea, to pour gasoline on that organization, to pour gasoline on that individual that's passionate about the work, that knows what they're talking about, that already has the built-in community trust, and then step away. My job is not to tell them how they can tweak it and how to, do this and that. My job is to find that individual and make it as easy as possible for them to get their idea realized. So, in my 7 months, that's what I've been doing. It's a pleasure to be born here and just see how much stuff is happening in our community. I love meeting with Malik Yakini and his, learning about his project. I love meeting with Jerry Hebron and learning about food insecurity, and the stuff that she got going on over there. I love meeting with Bryce. Bryce always got a million ideas for you that he gonna drop on you. You know, but it's great to know that this thought behind how a lot of people see Detroit is completely fabricated. This is one of the most innovative, thoughtful cities in America, and the reason why I'm in this position is like I said, I'm here to pour gasoline on those ideas and those people, and see those dreams actualized.
Nate, you said something that resonated with me, and that's you started out by listening. And I don't think when we talk about listening to organizations, we don't typically associate that with philanthropic organizations. But the other thing that you sort of called out is this fabricated notion of who Detroit is narrative-wise versus what we really see. But I will insert as the moderator that I think philanthropy has played a part in framing what I would call this deficit-based narrative in philanthropic language. Pam, do you want to talk about how we language our work, our cities, and even the investments and the problems that they are supposed to solve?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've often felt that too. I think there's also always a framing of the problem that is greater than it is. The problems are great. I'm not saying they're not great, but it's as if those that are experiencing the problem can't contribute to the solution. It's just exactly what Nate just said. And I also think that there is I always look at it this way. There are those who are holding the purse, right? And then those who have ideas and activated solutions. And I used to say ideas, but they're beyond ideas. They're actually activated solutions. And this whole notion of, because what Kevin and Nate are describing are still, if you think about the supply chain of moving that money from the purse to the ideas and activated solutions, it's still the very first step. What they're doing is not traditional philanthropic activity in Detroit. I think that these young men are being very innovative in and of themselves and how they're approaching their work, and hats off to their foundations who are supporting that approach. And I think it's a first step. And what we have to move to is now, how can we start to move those dollars, right? We're in that big purse to those projects and to take risk. It's the same thing people do in entrepreneurship every day. You got to take risk, but people take risk on people they like and they trust. And so then what the work that they're doing, the work that we've been doing with the Detroit Innovation Fellows and our Any Idea Small Business thing, is moving kind of the barriers out of the way to build those opportunities for trust. One of the things that we did when we knew we didn't have trust is we embraced the fact that we didn't have trust with small businesses. I'm referring to our Any Idea Small Business competition. And we partnered with those who we knew did, right? And so that's another layer. But yeah, I think the language that we use is, there's all these different worlds, and it's just like if you grow up in a family and you're used to your codes and the way you speak, and then you go to another family, you can't figure out what they're talking about. That's what we're talking about here. But again, I still think there's a role for translators, between these worlds. We need to develop that. You're actually one, Orlando. Diana Nacera is one. These are individuals that are living in both spaces and can translate those worlds and build trust between them. I think there needs to be more said about the roles that people like that you play, that Diana Nacera plays, that other people play, that can help build those bridges. Don't know if I answered the question, but I sure went on about something, didn't I?
No, you did. And even in our prep call, you talked about the willingness. I really want you to expound on this, because I thought this was the willingness on part of power structures, organization, resources to be uncomfortable in receiving feedback. Like, how does that work? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's not easy, right? I mean, and like I work in a space where I have the privilege of making decisions about large sums of dollars to impact people's lives. I know that, I own that, and I don't take it lightly. I'm humbled by that, right? And sometimes when, because I come in with a little purse, a purse that people like Knight and Ford have helped fill for me, so I can take it to the community. And sometimes you come into spaces where people are needing access to that and have felt left out of that. And there's a defensiveness that I'm coming in with, there's a defensiveness that they're coming in with, and you can't get anything done, right? And so what I've learned to do is accept the fact that just because I have the purse doesn't mean I'm the smartest one in the room.
Yeah.
Although people will make you feel like you are because you have the purse, but you don't believe them, right? So don't drink that Kool-Aid, but just remember you're not the smartest one in the room. That actually, to Kevin and Nate's point, the person that's living the problem every day is actually the smartest one in the room. So you need to listen. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And so, Kevin, you've really done an amazing job in honoring the expertise that exists in neighborhoods by investing in people and in organizations. But Pam said something interesting. She said that was that's always the first step. What comes after for you, Kevin?
Well, Nate said it, Orlando. I mean, part of the issue is I am here as a resource. So if we can get a grant to you to do your work, it's my job to get out of the way, like Nate said, and let you do the work you know how to do. And then if you need support, whether it's some training or an entry point to other funders or whatever it is, it's my job to help you gain that access and to not be a gatekeeper and to not try to brand this as, oh, we found this person doing this. We discovered this person. That's not how you go about this process. The process is I'm trying to serve you and your organization so you can do the best work that you're trying to do. And then what I'm going to ask you, the only thing I'm going to ask of you is, who are we missing? Who else should I be talking to? Who else is trying to do this work? So that's the approach that we need to take. And it's definitely not, Pam is right about this. We need to do more of that in Detroit in the philanthropic community. We don't do enough of that. We don't. You got to get out of your office, out of your ivory tower and go to actually meet with people in communities. And whether that means you're going to a meeting at 8 a.m. before they got to go to work, or whether you're going to a meeting in the evening after people get home from work, you've got to make the time. Your job should not be a 9-to-5 job. Your job should be to meet with people where they are and to try to understand and learn more from them so you can do your grant making better.
I think what's dope about what you and Nate are stating is that you are creating another full-time position for that organization to stay in constant communication with you and your benchmarks. You have, you're clear. Here are the resources. Do the work, holler at me if you need me, let me know who else I need to be talking to. I mean, everybody is not doing that in the philanthropic space. And that, in so many regards to a lot of philanthropic organizations is such a novel idea. We got to check in every 2 weeks and, figure out these bi-monthly reports, and you spend more time gathering the reports than doing the work. This is why I appreciate what Pam was able to pass with the Detroit Innovation Fellowship. Don't even worry about a grant report, y'all. Y'all just go ahead and do the work in this video.
The other grantees we have, though, will be of what you just described, though. They're probably rolling their eyes because we are more onerous.
We have a question. We have a few questions. I know we're coming up on 30 minutes. But
Orlando, I'm sorry, Orlando. Can I just say one quick thing? We also have to. You can't just go by these outcomes and you lay out these. People are fighting for real social justice in this city. That takes time. It takes patience, money to help them to do that. And for you to expect that somebody's going to reform the police in a year is ridiculous. So we also have to be more realistic about what people can accomplish with the money that we provide them with, when there's all these external factors, political will, other things that can get in the way of them accomplishing what they want to. We got to understand those dynamics.
political will, COVID, all
Yeah.
of the above. And, traditionally philanthropic organizations expect, world change from their little $70,000 in a year. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. We got a couple of questions from Facebook and I want to make sure I get to them. If y'all are cool with going a little bit over time. From Chase Cantrell, the city of Detroit boasts of raising $1 billion in grants since exiting bankruptcy. Can each of you talk about the role of philanthropy in funding the government in a city like Detroit? What is the right balance? That's from Chase Cantrell at Building Community Value. Who wants to tackle that?
I'll take it. I think that it's a great question, Chase, because this city is so unique in many ways in that philanthropy stepped into a very challenging financial situation to really plug holes and fund programs that in other places public dollars go towards. In Detroit, I think there's this question, and when I first got here, someone from one of the local papers said to me, is playing this role in Detroit, does that stifle the ability to fund creative work in communities? And I would say that I think it does in some ways, and it creates a competition between the public sector and communities that I don't think is healthy. So I think one of the things we have to think about is what is the way that we can support specific programs the government is trying to launch, provide resources for pilot programs, and then government finding ways, particularly if we have a new administration, finding ways to fund that work to scale. And we are the ones that help pilot innovation and work through, they can be scaled through the public sector.
Pam, I see you shaking your head. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I'm just agreeing violently. I'm agreeing with him because he's exactly right. When I think of our entrepreneurial space, I mean, that's been the challenge, right? Because philanthropy has been funding things that actually the public sector probably should be doing, whether it's, state or federal. And he's right. It does create it does create an environment that's a little bit out of balance. And we find that as, at some point, you don't want philanthropy to be responsible, right, for how to position a strong economy in a city. It's good that we had the benefit for philanthropy to step in when it did, and it has continued to. But at some point, to Kevin's point, when we got to get better also at making those proof of concepts, right? Proving those cases, and then creating that narrative, that story, that data in a compelling way that can actually begin those conversations so that the public sector can begin to do more. Yep.
Yeah, Nate, I want to bring you in on this conversation that we were having on our prep call about equity and what equity looks like before and what it looks like now.
Yeah, so I think me and your first conversation was with you and Donna talking about what you guys work we're doing. So Detroit is an 80% Black city. Is when we talk about equity, and I came in at a really interesting time in philanthropy, right? So I came in at the beginning of DEI. DEI was everybody was on DEI, and I think that what's happened is the murder of George Floyd has enabled a space where we can really drill down on what equity is. We can really start to talk about equity in a way that makes sense, right? So instead of using words, like diversity and equity, now, we're saying Black people, so it's, the conversation has changed. And instead of taking that scenic route that I think that, to Pam's point, you're talking about these words and these codes, and, you're taking a scenic route, and it's, and you can kind of get into the weeds regarding the language. But now I think that the direct language that we're saying is exactly what we want to see actualized in our community. So when I say equity, I'm actually talking about Black people doing projects and actualizing grants in their own communities. you know? So my goal is to create a portfolio that's representative of the people in the communities, in the neighborhoods, you know? So that's, when I say equity, that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's no room for ambiguity in the speech. That's exactly what
Come
we're
on,
talking
Nate.
about, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think that's where we are. That's where we are with regards to everything. I think everything now is going through a transformation where we're done with the ambiguity. You know, now we want to talk about exactly what we're talking about. You know, and if you're not talking about that, you know, then we got to have another conversation. I'm grateful and I'm thankful that we've arrived at this point. You know, in Detroit specifically, and in philanthropy, so we can have some real conversations, you know, with regards to our communities.
Kevin, can you talk about what that real conversation looks like when you go back into the structure of Ford, right? You're in the city of Detroit, in the city of Detroit, where you can't afford to make grants that are race neutral or race blind, right? So you have been very intentional. What's that conversation like within the institution of Ford?
Yeah, Ford. I mean, Ford is, as a global institution and one that focuses a lot on the federal level. I mean, we do have some place-based projects in Detroit where we were founded, New York and New Orleans in particular. But then when you start thinking about the global, you know, the work we're doing in Puerto Rico, work we're doing in West Africa, I mean, it does get to some place-based strategy. So one of the things that makes Detroit so unique is that I'm the only staff person outside of the New York office. I'm the only one in place and embedded locally. So being able to relay back all of this deep information and understanding of what's happening in the city from those people that I talked about, that I'm meeting with, that we're trying to fund, relaying that back to Ford helps to inform some of our broader strategies. When you talk about, for example, funding Black-led organizing work in New York, and when the conversation in New York covers Black-led organizing work all across the country, but I can give a unique perspective on what Black-led organizing looks like in Detroit, the different sets of activists and organizers who are doing this work in different ways, that there's work that's happening that's maybe focused on anti-violence, some work maybe focused on food justice, whatever it is, I can bring that back and relay that back to help inform our overall strategy and how we need to think about Black organizing, for example, is not a monolithic strategy, but a varied strategy. Detroit, you see all the strands of that exist in Detroit. So that's a really great way to inform the work. Plus, I get to partner with folks like my colleague Jackie Burton, who leads a lot of the work in New Orleans. New Orleans and Detroit have a lot of similarities, and so there's a good way for us to connect the dots and think about the work we're doing in Detroit and how we might be able to go deeper and do some of that same work in New Orleans, and also the work in New Orleans, understanding that and bringing some of the lessons from that to Detroit.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry. Well, I was going to say, if I could add too, in our small business development space too, I mean, we're looking at Black, Hispanic, and immigrant businesses because, you know, it is a 80% Black city. We also have a huge Hispanic and growing immigrant population. And what we found too is if you look at federal SBA dollars in terms of how they're lent, even prior to COVID, you know, 3% of those dollars are going to Black businesses, 6% of them are going to Hispanic businesses, and everybody else is getting everything else. The underserved communities with the community action advantage dollars, 1% of the SBA dollars are going to underserved communities across the country. Wow. And that's pre-COVID. So when we look at that, our work, we are definitely emphasizing Black businesses, but also Hispanic and immigrant-owned businesses as well.
Thank you, Pam. Anika Goss-Foster at Detroit Future City said, we can't let this equity lens die down. We have to continue to chip away at it. This is the last question because we are, of course, over time. Kevin, I want to ask you about within the philanthropic space in the city of Detroit, who is really building this equity framework within this space? Let's talk about it.
They're right here. Pam, Nate. I mean, NEI, to me, the work that Pam has done has been incredible. To be able to take a program that was not necessarily deeply focused on equity when it started, but to really reframe, restructure, do the hard work, again, of engaging with community and creating a program that really reached folks in communities across the city, entrepreneurs that may not have had access. To me, that's incredible work and a model for how to build out equitable practices in Detroit and across the country. Honestly, it's a model for across the country. For Nate, I mean, you've already heard how Nate is coming into the space. I mean, we need more grant makers in the space who think about this the way that Nate does and how to actually, and this is what we all have to think about, how we can use our resources, structure those resources to support what's happening in Detroit, the current population of the city, and really make sure that we're very clear about that approach and purpose. And of course, I can't leave out my good friend Sarita Scott at Kellogg, who has come into the field almost around the same time as Nate and is building a practice at Kellogg to do the same type of work. So I feel like we have a lot of partners here. Particularly, I love a lot of the folks who are coming into the field and bringing that analysis as they come into the field, because we have to really change the dynamics in philanthropy in Detroit. And these are the folks that can help do that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pam.
Keep interrupting. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Pam.
There's someone else I want to add too. Actually, Anika Goss at Detroit Future Cities, the Center for, I'm going to botch it up, Anika, but the Center for Inclusion, Research, and Engagement that she just launched. I think there's an opportunity with that work to hold a lot of different initiatives accountable. You know, she's been working with the Tawana Black in Minneapolis to shape a set of metrics. And what happens is a lot of these projects are not tied together, right? It's a systemic problem, but you have workforce people doing this, you have entrepreneurship people doing that. And she has an opportunity to use that center with data-driven research to create accountability metrics for a lot of these grant makers, you know, in terms of how we're making grants so that we are actually hitting outcomes that are related to inclusion and equity. So I definitely, there's so much promise in that. I definitely wanted to add that to Kevin's great list.
Yeah, Anika says it is the Center for Equity, Engagement, and Research.
Thank you.
You want to know something that is amazing as we wrap up? I started my community development career back in 2012 and began to sort of just take inventory and stock of what organizations were doing around the city and who was supporting those organizations in the philanthropic space. One of the things that I have not seen in my short career that may have happened before my time, but definitely not during my time, is philanthropy talking to each other and being open to having these kind of catalytic and crucial conversations to provide and to shed light on some of the issues that we discuss privately that we would never tell our program officers, right? But it's like, this is, you know, I think the first step, another first step, Pam, toward building trust with people doing the work in the city, building transparency that's so needed, and also making sure that we create this highway and transfer of shared expertise. Everybody's an expert. We have to figure out how we can honor each other's expertise. And by you guys participating in this conversation and even working on a shared equity agenda for the city of Detroit and how you invest in people, hats off to you guys. And I thank you all so very much for joining me tonight.
It was great.
That was a lot of fun.
Great.
A lot of fun. Thank you.
A lot of fun, yeah. So I want everybody to stick around because we're coming back with Drake Pfeiffer. We got an after party. Listen, it's been a long 3 days and it's hump day. What better way to end your hump day than with a party? Listen, I want to thank New Economy Initiative for making all of this possible. We built this night 1, night 2, night 3, the final night tonight. What an amazing conversation with IOB and some philanthropic leaders here in the city of Detroit. Thank you to the Cochran House. Make sure that you visit thecochranhouse.com to set up your visit when you're coming to Detroit, or if you need a staycation. It's Black owned by two sisters, Rodrika and Francina. Check them out at thecochranhouse.com. Shout out to Bridge Detroit, our media content partner. You will be able to see all of these conversations on the bridgedetroit.com website, where you can go and you can subscribe for free. I want to thank our tech guru, JP, and I want to thank the founder of Urban Consulate, Claire Nelson. And once again, we want to congratulate and shout out all of the 2019-2020 cohort of the Detroit Innovation Fellows. You are the reason why we are here. We are honoring you. We are honoring your innovative minds, and we are honoring your work throughout this process. So stay tuned. I'm coming back for the after party with Drake Pfeiffer. See you soon.